Guller survived a catastrophic fall that claimed the life of his best friend and eventually led to the loss of his left arm. An expedition leader of epic proportion, Gary then climbed to the very summit of Mount Everest and became the first person with one arm to stand on top of the world.
So in 1986, you were in a mountaineering accident that caused you to have no use of your left arm. How has this accident changed your perspective on mountaineering and adventure?
Yeah, I mean, one, it's a good question. I mean, when that accident happened, I was young. I was 20 and thought I was invincible, like most 20-year-olds, right? And it happened so very quickly. And I didn't realize at the time the extent of the injuries until I was flown back to the U.S. and I was diagnosed, and then I noticed obviously my left arm wasn't working. My neck was broken in a couple of places. I mean, I was pretty beat up. I mean, it was a terrible fall, terrible accident. I gotta honestly say, 4 or 5 years after that accident were perhaps the darkest moments of my entire life. I just wanted to be an adventurer. I wanted to be a climber. I wanted to explore the world. And, in those days, there really weren't a lot of explorers or mountaineers with any sort of physical challenge. You just didn't hear these people.
Right.
And I struggled with all the things that are pretty common, after pretty serious trauma or injury, and, addiction and alcohol and drugs, and just lost, I say sometimes going everywhere, but at the same time going nowhere.
Mm-hmm.
But then, it took about 4 or 5 years, which is pretty common in terms of time. Right. And I had my grandfather. I went back to where I was born, back to England. And I remember my grandfather knew what I'd been up to, and which was no good. And I remember he sort of grabbed me by the face, and he just looked me straight in the eye, and he said, "Gary, if no one's ever climbed some of the highest mountains in the world with one arm," he said, be the first." And I respected that man. And at that time, I said, "Right, I'm going to slowly start that life again, relight that fire in my belly and start the process." And I did. I needed that kicking, I guess, at that time in my life. And he was the right person and the right location to give it to me. And, I started slowly, and I met some very, very nice people and established and quite well-known mountaineers, and they saw my passion. And they, sort of helped me in a direction that ultimately led me to the world.
Yeah, no, it's an unfortunate situation of what happened, but I do find across the board, whether you're born with it or it's been acquired later in life, that, it can be a gift, and you can, go and resume what you're doing. Obviously, not every situation or disability allows for that. But, talking in our circumstances, and, there are a lot that allow for that, is, wonderful. And sometimes you just need that push to, go for it, especially when you've been knocked down and have lost hope. And
yeah, and my grandfather was an old man. He came from the old school, sort of post-Second World War era. And I would call it strong encouragement.
Mm-hmm. No, it's great. It's really, really good. Really
right.
Good. Yeah. All right. So in May, you celebrate your 17th anniversary of reaching Mount Everest summit and leading the largest cross-disability group to the Mount Everest base camp at 17,500 feet. Quite amazing. Can you tell us an anecdoted or shortened version of what that journey was like?
Yeah, I mean, let me just start off real quick, and I'll keep it kind of short. I mean, I could speak for days and days.
Right. Yeah, that's why I said a shortened version.
Right. But my very first presentation, I was invited. It was in El Paso, Texas, after I did not make the summit back in 2001. And it was to a disability convention, right? I'd never been around anybody with a physical or cognitive challenge ever in my life, right? And at the end of the presentation, the lights kind of went up in the room, and in the back of the room, this person is struggling to raise his hand. And I could barely see him. So I walked to the back of the room and I could see it was a person in a wheelchair and a person with quadriplegia. And he could only move one part of his body. And he looked at me straight in the eyes and said, "Mr. Guller, would you ever take somebody like me to some of the places that you've been to?" And, initially I thought, we're great friends now. So this guy not only has this pretty extreme physical challenge, he's got to be a little bit cognitively challenged as well. If you think, wheelchair, quadriplegia, airplanes, altitude, very poor countries. I mean, it's just not possible in that moment. And I was like, "No, Gary, you can't make this decision for this person. If they want to try to achieve it, why don't you give them the opportunity or be part of that journey with them?" We exchanged phone numbers, and basically 2 years later, after, lots and lots of knocking on doors, a lot of money needed to be raised. We had 14, 15 people with various degrees of physical and cognitive challenges, and a number of assistants, supporters, helpers, Sherpa, porters, everything. We finally got on the plane and flew to Nepal. And yes, 17, 18 days later, after flying into the mountains of the Himalayas, we became the largest cross-disability team on this scope. I say with a lot of confidence, I'm convinced it was the most diverse team ever, which included just about everyone, every type of person you could possibly ever imagine from all of society. And we fell down and we got up and we cried and we bled and we hugged and we laughed our way right into base camp at, like you said, over 17,500 feet. By far, one, if not the most favorite moments of my entire life. A lot of these people have been told no all of their life, either from birth or after an injury. No, no, no. And look where they are. I mean, some of these people had never been on a camping trip before. Some of them had never been out of their own city or state before. And here they are, all the way in Nepal, one of the poorest countries in the world, thousands of miles away from their support, their base, right? And we're at 17,500 feet. I mean, it was incredible. I mean, it was absolutely incredible. Now, would some of those people want to ever come with me again on another expedition? I don't know, but they at least know in their life now, if they wanted to, they could. Mm-hmm. That was the magic.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. I mean, I think, if you know that you can, if you've done it once and then you can do it again. Whether you want to do it or not is a different story. But it's nice to know that you have accomplished something that maybe you didn't think that you could beforehand. How did you and your team prepare for this monumental event?
Well, I mean, that's another great question, because, and I get asked this question a lot, because it was very challenging and very difficult for us to all get together for the 2 years prior to us arriving into Nepal, right? But the moments that we did have the opportunity to all get together as a team, instead of concentrating on doing athletic endeavors or pushing the teams, do this, I spent time with everyone getting to know each other better, know their family, know their past, know their histories, know their good traits, their not so good traits, what they're proud of, what they're not so proud of, and bonding, right? So at least when we got to Nepal, because I had anticipated we were going to have challenges that no one can foresee. They can't foresee, I can't foresee for them, I can't foresee for the expedition, nor the weather, the porters, the Sherpa, no one. And we're going to have to be at that highest level possible to overcome those challenges. Not only overcome them, but have the ability to overcome them quickly. Because we didn't have the luxury of just extra days and days and days on a limited budget. We had to keep moving to achieve what we set out there to achieve, right? So I guess to answer your question in a nutshell, when we could all get together, we did. It wasn't as often as most people think, but when we did, it was much more powerful and much more stronger. And from the very first time we got together, everybody trying to figure out who each other was as an individual, to the time we got together before we left, we were a very tight, very, very tight unit.
That's great. And I think having a tight unit that knows one another and so forth is especially important, and it's also very comforting and rewarding. So what was one thing, if anything, that you packed on this adventure that your rest of your team did not?
Well,
Because you have experience. They do not. So what was there anything?
it wasn't necessarily, I mean, other than things for safety reasons.
Right.
The one thing I definitely had that no one else had, back in those days, satellite telephones were kind of very, very important to have. But I think most importantly, what I had was the trust and really the trust of the Nepali people and the Sherpa people from years and years of spending nights with them, surviving avalanches with them, assisting their family, their children, learning about them also learning about me. And I know that was invaluable, because it was like I was bringing a new family over to join another family that I already had there. I had their back and they knew it, and they had my back. And in turn, we had the belief from the expedition team that we were going to look after them in the best way that we possibly could in order for everyone to achieve, you know.
Right, of course. And were there any obstacles that you guys had to overcome? And if so, how did you guys all triumph?
You know, sometimes when you see the short video clips or even the documentary, you know, you kind of think, oh, this was all sort of cushy, and it was everything sort of ran according to plan. But in reality, there are a lot of challenging times. I mean, you're dealing with altitudes above 12,000, 14,000, 16,000 feet. And it's not like going skiing in Colorado. It's not like you get to take the chairlift to 15,000 feet or 14,000 feet, and then you ski down very quickly to a lower altitude. I mean, you're actually living, communicating, going through the toilet, cleaning yourself, trying to stay positive, stay focused, and then add in the cold weather, then add in paralysis, right? And then add in the altitude. I mean, it's easy for people not to be happy, right? You don't have unhappy moments in the photographs or on the videos, but so there were challenges, and it was those type of challenges. And I remember telling the team in Kathmandu before we got on the plane to go into the mountains that I said, you know, I had to be upfront with them. I said, look, I am not aware of everything we're going to struggle with. I know from my past experience what I think I know we're going to expect, but I don't know for each individual one of you. Therefore, you folks are going to have to be able to quickly come to me and know that this is not an executive door, my tent door is open. And we will do whatever is necessary to make the challenge a little bit more easier.
Yeah.
And, you know, and honestly, they knew that, and they knew I meant that from my heart. And so when we did have a challenge, or we had individual or team challenges, we quickly got together. And I always say we started that meeting at a very high level. So there wasn't a bunch of fluff. People felt they could be open, they could be honest, they could be direct, they could agree with me, or they could disagree with me. And I had to also be open and honest and have that ability to kind of like listen to them and try to understand where they're coming from, because you can't if you're not a person with quadriplegia or you're not a person with paraplegia, but you can try. And usually if that person on the receiving end knows that you are trying, then a solution can be found.
Right.
And truth. And I didn't know really any of this prior to. These are not things I learned in some sort of management book or some sort of consulting book. I learned about things at 12,000 feet, 15,000 feet. And, thankfully, for the most part, we were able to overcome just about every challenge that confronted us.
Right.
Yeah, it was incredible. I mean, it's hard for me to even
wrap your head around.
Right?
Yeah,
right.
Of course. Well, and also when you're with a group of people, it's easier to overcome your obstacles and really triumph than if it was just one person. and or just one and just you and somebody else.
Yes.
So having a group is really, really important, especially on something like this adventure. So
And then, right, I mean, I think
yeah, well, in life too. I mean, I'm just talking about your circumstances and
yes.
the climb, but I mean, in any adventure for sure. I mean, in any part of life for sure. In your motivational speaking engagements, you often quote that it's very easy to limit oneself. Can you explain that phrase? It's quite powerful, and what you mean by how one would limit themselves?
Well, I think I can only speak I can speak for myself just for a second, because I believe that it's easy to place limits on yourself because there's then little risk of failure, right? It's when you get out of your comfort zone or try something new, then there is the possibility that you're not going to succeed, and you may have to regroup and figure out another way, right? So it's easier, right? And I say this, and I'm not saying this in a joking way. Sometimes when I'm trying to lose some weight or get into shape, my biggest fear or my biggest challenge is not actually when I'm running on the road or in the mountains. My biggest challenge is sometimes putting my shoes on and getting out of the freaking front door. Right. But to kind of in a nutshell, it's easier not to try new things. Because when you don't try new things, then you don't really have the likelihood of but then saying that, you don't also have the likelihood of succeeding or enjoying a new experience or being part of something that you never thought was possible before. But I think most importantly, it's just kind of easier not to try, right?
Yeah, I think trying is really, really important. I mean, if you don't try, how will you know? And I think you're also losing out if you don't try. But
Any level, at
yeah,
any level,
any
right?
level.
Not everybody has to go climb Everest or go to base camp or even go to Nepal for that matter. Sometimes it's a matter of just going to the shopping center or, meeting friends and going for a roll or a hike or whatever the best way it is, or water skiing, or, I know I have friends with quadriplegic that have jumped out of airplanes that are part of, I think it's Eels on Wheels is a nice organization, right? Folks who with quadriplegia and paraplegia can go scuba diving, and these aren't things that the one particular person I'm thinking in mind, it's not something he does every week, but the opportunity's out there. And he's like, why not? Life is very short. Although I have this severe physical challenge, I might as well give it a go.
Right. Of course. Yeah. Why not? I mean, it's important to give it a go for sure.
Yes.
So out in the world, there often is a limit on how people view the community of diverse, different, and able people. What is an obstacle or if there's more than one obstacle that you've had to kind of overcome and navigate around the stigma of being limited in a society that is able-bodied?
Well, I mean, just think about just for a second, let's say somebody with one arm, climbing in the Himalaya, there we go. Right. There's really, that's not possible for a start. I mean, that's just one.
Right.
But, when I get asked that question, what could I do? Let's say, I believe that the best thing that those with physical or cognitive challenges can do to make it easier for everyone else, not necessarily easier than somebody able-bodied community, just equal, right? Is obviously one, be a pretty darn good role model, and two, try not to feed that negative stereotype that's out there. Try to rise above that, right? I mean, I think about that when I give presentations. Okay, yes, I am a summiter. I've been very fortunate. I've been very blessed, but at the same time, when I'm up on stage, it's very obvious. I'm not hiding my arm. It's very obvious. And if there's one thing that, if it's 1 in 100 or 1 in 10,000 people, if there's one person that walks away from there that has a more positive appreciation for those with any sort of challenge, then to me, I have done my job, you know, and I've done my job from my heart. And they get it and they got it, right? And it's just, I think it's important, as with everyone, right, to be the best that we can be. It's unfortunate, but it's true. Somebody's going to look at the person at the bar with one arm, let's say, differently than they're going to look at that person at the bar with two arms. And the longer you stay there, for some reason, it's more okay for the person with two arms, and it's more sad for the person with one arm, right? And for me personally, that was one thing I had to, one, be aware of, and two, not necessarily make big changes, but just be aware. And I think that's important. I mean, because we cannot ask the able-bodied community to be aware of us if we're not also kind of aware of them, right? I mean, we all have to work together. We all have to come together and understand each other better, right? I think that will, obviously, that will make the world a better place.
Of course. And you talk about inclusion, and you talk about accessibility, which is obviously part of inclusion, and so forth. And, you know, that's still something that's, you know, not perfected, and hopefully within years, you know, it can be, and people can perceive those who have disabilities or some type of physical deformity and so forth, you know, an asset to life, instead of, you know, an asset to life to some degree, if not all to nth degree, versus a limitation, or something that is looked down upon.
I always say, you know, I said this at base camp when we got there, I said the freedom to explore is a freedom everyone should have, regardless of their ability or their disability, right? And, you know, to add on to that, and a freedom to live where they choose, a freedom to you know, work where they can, just the same freedoms. Nobody's asking for anything extra.
Of course not.
Equal freedoms, right? You know, this day and age, we personally, I think we should be beyond that as a society as a whole, but fortunately we're not. But it's people like you know, raising, I think, having these positive stories from people, right? And hopefully, you know, there's one thing to, I think, share with the disability community, but, you know, sometimes then when we do that, and I've said this at many disability events, we can't just be preaching to ourselves. We all know.
Of course not, right?
You need to bring in people that are outside of the community to understand a little bit more. And I think once that starts happening more, and I'm starting to see that it is, then I think people become, I'm not being harsh when I'm saying that, they become less ignorant, right? They become more open. And that's always as you know, I mean, that's a very positive thing.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. So what are your success principles, and are your success principles easy to ascertain?
Sometimes, right? You know, I try. You know, I don't have like, you know, I think that's why, let's say, companies hire me, is that I don't come in and sort of start spewing out things from books that everybody can go and buy. You know, it's management strategies or sales strategies or marketing strategies, right? I mean, everybody can go buy these books, right? They bring me in for an outside perspective, but there are a few things that I am pretty steadfast on, right? Both from a commercial or business perspective and a personal one. They're very, more so now, I think, so intertwined is, I mean, number one, I think, is to play fair.
Right.
Create a, you know, depends on what your level you are within any organization. Create a good, positive environment, right? Open and honest communication is huge, right? And you know, I had an old Sherpa tell me one time when I came back down from the summit, Gary, your life is going to change now. And I had no idea what he meant. But when I was about to say goodbye to him, he said, Gary, he said, whatever you do, you were blessed when you came to the Himalayas, and you were very blessed when you made it to the summit. He said, now try to use those experiences to make others greater, you know.
Right.
well, we're all human. I can't think of it this way every day. I have my
Right,
own
of
challenge.
course not. Yeah.
So the days that I wake up, like today was one of those days. I just woke up and it was like bing, bing, bing. Everything just seemed to flow. They call this like lunta energy,
Mm-hmm.
right? And on those days, I'm like, wow, okay, these are days I need to reach out to people. And if they're a little low, I can bring them up. If we're both on the same page, then we're going to be elevated higher, right? And so I say, make others greater, inspiring others to be better,
Yeah.
better people, right? And sometimes it's a simple pat on the back. Sometimes it's an acknowledgement, or speaking to them. They say if you speak to somebody from your heart, they listen also from their heart. And when I think when they're all put into the same basket, then the wonderful flowers and fruits will come from the baskets, right?
Right. No, for sure. And so, okay, so as a professional motivational speaker, an athlete, and a world adventurer, as well as an author and a documentary filmmaker, you've quite done a lot. You have the drive to do more and give more. Now, can you tell us about your nonprofit organization, Make Others Great, and its mission?
Yes, I mean, one Make Others Greater is a very small nonprofit, and it's very young. It's just over 2 years official. Up prior to that, it was all the endeavors we did in remote areas was all direct private funding. Like somebody asked me, Gary, what's happening in Tanzania or what's happening in Nepal? Do you need something for the schools? I'd say yes. They'd write me a check. I'd get the money to where it needed to go. And then I had a client said, Gary, why don't you become a little bit more official, and then we can work on some things in the future together, Mm-hmm. And so we formed it, did all the right things. But Make Others Greater, again, it's very, very small. We just have a handful of private donors, and 99.9% of everything raised, I think, bar the bank fee, right? Mm-hmm. It goes direct to source. Mm-hmm. But small scale. So I don't want folks to think that we're just flush with money, but we place the money that we do receive, the small amount we do receive, into very remote and undeveloped countries to where, $20 may buy 1,000 pens, right? $100 may buy a medical kit for a village that didn't have a medical kit before. I just know enough people in these certain regions that are willing to actually take what is required from A to B safely to improve. I'm hoping, if I always say one child at a time or one person at a time. So sort of our mission is health, safety, and education, primarily in Nepal. But we do reach out to other countries around the world. Morocco, we supported a school a bit last year, and also in Tanzania, Mozambique, Peru, we supported a young lady to get through high school and then into college. She wanted to be a vet, through the attention of one of our sort of advisory board members, and they're all vetted, and we have a good small team and a nice small advisory board. We're very small, and this COVID obviously has put a bit of a slowdown on it. It's just very difficult to get even medicine from, let's say, Kathmandu to the remote village is near impossible now. I mean, they're locked down, and it's about to get worse. But, we're still communicating, and we're still moving goods and equipment and supplies when it is possible and when it's safely to do so. So we're hanging in there. We'll be fine. We've got some good supporters. We haven't lost one penny during the whole COVID, and they know.
Amazing.
But again, we're very small in numbers, right?
Right.
But stuck with us. Yeah, and they've stuck with us, and they know what we're doing, and we're in pretty good communication with them. But, there's a lot of trust involved too, right? Because a lot of these transactions, they're cash transactions that are going, from here to someone, to somebody else, and going upstream and then down the valley and over the pass to make it to this one particular valley with pencils and school supplies and all present. So yeah, that's what we do, and we're happy with the direction. We hope that it grows in the future.
Yeah, no, for sure, and I hope so too as well.
Yeah.
So what has been, or what would you consider to be one of your career highlights?
That's a very difficult question. I've been very, 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 very blessed. You know, I've got to say, probably the highlight of it all. Of course, the summit was a dream that came true.
Mm.
The day we arrived into base camp was pretty much up there with the best ever.
Mm-hmm.
I just having that many people from that many different walks of life do something that I've never been achieved before, ever. Probably even thought of on the scale before, right? I've got to say that was probably one of the best moments in my life.
Yeah, no, I mean, all your adventures to me are highlights. So, you know, I mean,
and like, there's been some that have been challenging, but I'm talking about if you bring in, you know, I can't compare arriving to base camp with this wonderful, wonderful team of people to learn how to swim again, to do an Ironman in Hawaii, right? That are two very different experiences. Yes, personally, for me to get the confidence and get over the fear of swimming and starting out doing 20 meters and then 40 meters and then 60 meters to where I could do a mile over a period of a year under the time. You know, yes, that was a huge, huge accomplishment within me personally, right? But I cannot think of a greater moment that I am proud of, that not just being the leader, but being part of the team that were out there with me. And that feeling, I mean, my heart starts beating. That feeling's never going to go away. It's huge. Yeah.
I don't think so either. And now you've accomplished quite a bit, clearly, and probably or somebody would think that the pinnacle of all your successes would be climbing to the top of Mount Everest. But post-COVID, what do you think, or what will be your next adventure?
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, COVID definitely has slowed everything down, right? I mean, my next challenge is to lose the COVID 20 that I've put on.
A lot of people have. I've lost it just because I don't know. I'm just that type of, but yeah.
Right. Well, you know, it's I got into being stuck at home and having to do something and keep busy. I really got into Italian cooking and baguettes and
no, I get it. My mom, I mean, I get it. Most people have. I mean, I'm very disciplined. So aside from the stuff that I dealt with mentally that caused me to lose weight, I can hold off. So I can sustain my weight.
Right.
But a lot of people can't. I have a different type of self-discipline. But anyways, don't feel bad. Most people have. So
well, I target to be where my goal weight by the end of the year, which is really, really good. And, you know, hopefully all this will pass at some point. But, you know, there's definitely more work with Make Others Greater. Get back to Nepal, get back to the remote villages, really try to put together a more of a long-term plan. You know, we started last year, a year and a half ago, building a helicopter pad to a remote village so it's easier to get medical supplies or, in case of emergency, somebody out of the village. And we started building a sort of a safe shelter for both children, women, adult, anybody really that needs it. It's just a safe place to stay for a short time, and to hopefully kind of keep moving that forward. You know, of course, I spent a lot of time down in South America and Peru. I want to go back down there as soon as possible.
Wow.
And of course, West Africa, you know, Northwest Africa in Morocco, there's a school there that, you know, support on a very small scale in the Atlas Mountains there. That again, these are places that, you know, $200, $300, $400 goes like a very, very long way, almost a whole year of supplies for paper and pencils, right? And that's before we even start. I mean, I probably would have some left over for some Band-Aids and other supplies. And it's going to be really nice to sort of concentrate a bit more, I think, on that aspect of my life. And I just enjoy it so much.
This was so wonderful. I enjoyed this
Nice.
very much.